Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought we'd have a look at some of the suggestions past the developers for July of 2025. There's some really fun stuff in ground and a lot of stuff which is pre-World War II, during World War II, and even modern day with some insane ideas. So let's get into them, let's have a bit of fun, and as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure to subscribe and also like the video. Let's get started. The first vehicle is for Germany, and it is the Rheinmetall Großtraktor 7.5 and 3.7 centimeter KWK. After Germany lost the First World War, they were bound to the Treaty of Versailles, which prohibited them of having a big military force and also developing in military aviation and land equipment such as planes, tanks, and cannons. So they developed them in secret instead and gave them false names. As such, they called them like agriculture vehicles, like the Großtraktor or the Linktree, or just made up false numbers like the 8.8 centimeter Flak 18, which was developed much later on, but given the number 18 to look like it was developed at the end of the First World War. In 1926, multiple companies such as Rheinmetall Borsig were commissioned to develop a 20-ton tank. The vehicle was called the Großtraktor, or large tractor, and was developed simultaneously with the Linktree, or the light tractor. The prototypes were scrapped or turned into exhibitions in 1937 due to being outdated and having shown what the real way of tank development should look like. The Großtraktor was designed as a heavy breakthrough vehicle. The armament was a 7.5 cm KWK 37 L24, which was later used on the Panzer IV, and also a 3.7 cm KWK 36 L45, which was actually later used on the Panzer IIIs, and also as infantry AT guns. Against infantry, the Großtraktor was fitted with multiple machine guns, one in the hull, one in the small turret over the transmission at the back as well. The approximate weight being around 16 tons, and the engine was a 6-cylinder engine, the BMW V8 airplane engine, which gave it 240 kilowatts of power. Unfortunately, when it comes to the armor was not very good. Just like a lot of these kind of 1920s, 1930s heavy tanks or breakthrough tanks, they only could really stop machine gun fire. The vehicle itself as well, the normal kind of setup of it just had a 75mm, but there were versions which kind of had a dual gun setup with the 37 and 75 in the similar turret, which is really cool. And those are the ones in the pictures. So hopefully this vehicle could come in. It has a crew of 6 and would be very similar to stuff like the Fahrzeug and also other vehicles. The next vehicle is one you look at and you go, there's no way this is actually real. And then it turns out it is actually real. It's the 2S35 Koalitsiya-SV. This was an experimental vehicle with a very interesting armament. Basically, what you take is the Mr. S or the MSTA, and you give it 2 guns instead of 1. Originally, the vehicle was developed as a variation of the 2S19 MSTAS, a self-propelled artillery piece introduced in 1989. Later, a decision was made to create a completely separate vehicle, thus initiating the development of the 2S35 Koalitsiya-SV in the mid-2000s as part of the Armata project. In 2002, the first phase of development began at the Burevestnik Central Scientific Research Institute in the city of Nizhny Novgorod, in response to the more advanced self-propelled artillery pieces being used by NATO member countries. The 2S35 was designed as a self-propelled artillery piece for tactical purposes, targeting tanks, structures, strategic points, non-strategic nuclear weaponry, and also counter-battery operations. A term designated for weapons aimed at retaliating against other self-propelled artillery pieces, such as tank destroyers. Then in 2006, a testbed was presented featuring 2 152.4mm 2A86 cannons mounted on the chassis of a T-80B model equipped with a CHTZ V84A engine and an experimental turret. The name Koalitsiya refers to the adoption of 2 152.4mm cannons, a term literally meaning the union of 2 weapons. The idea of two 152.4mm cannons remained from the design phase in 2002 until the 8th of April 2010, when the dual cannon concept was abandoned, though the name has been retained to this day. And on the 9th of May 2015, the 2S-35 Koalitsiya-SV was unveiled for the first time at the 70th anniversary celebration of Victory Day in the Great Patriotic War in Moscow. In 2018, 12 of the 2S-35 units were produced and were still undergoing testing. And in 2020 and 2021, a contract was signed between the Ministry of Defense and Ural-Vagonzavod for the vehicle's mass production. However, in 2023, the Armed Forces Command announced that the 2S-35 was still in the testing phase. Later, on the 20th of October 2023, the start of mass production was announced, thus concluding the testing phase and confirming the vehicle's adoption. Now only equipped with a single 152.4mm 2A88 cannon on the Russian Armed Forces. We also have another prototype for the Chito, the specific Type 4 Chito Prototype 1 for the Japanese. The Chito's journey began in 1941, conceived as a successor to the Type 1 Chi-He. Initially, the specifications laid out in early 1942 mirrored its predecessor, a 20-ton tank with 50mm of armor, 40 km/h top speed, and the Type 1 47mm tank gun. However, enhancements were introduced, including a coaxial machine gun, an electric turret drive, synchronous mesh transmission, and hydraulic steering. By August of 42, plans shifted to incorporate a more formidable high-velocity 57mm gun as an alternative, yet by January 43, the 20-ton design was deemed obsolete. In a strategic move, development transitioned in February to a larger medium tank, now a 25-ton behemoth boasting 75mm armor and also a 57mm gun. The evolving landscape of tank warfare prompted another shift later in the year. A research policy in July birthed a 35-ton medium tank armed with a cutting-edge 75mm tank gun. This became the Chi-Ri. In contrast, the 25-ton design, now the Chito, was destined for auxiliary support duty. The Chito's primary armament was the experimental 5.7cm tank gun Marushin, derived from the towed experimental motorized 57mm gun, specifically the Ko variant tested on the Ho-I tank. The Marushin gun aimed for a planned muzzle velocity of 810 meters per second and boasted the capability to fire APHE and HE shells. Development was slated for completion by March 1945. However, by August 1943, records hinted at the potential transition from the 57mm gun to the 75mm gun planned for the Chi-Ri, acknowledging the encroaching obsolescence of the former. In March 44, the first prototype of the 57mm Marushin gun saw the light of day, closely followed by the inaugural Chito prototype in May 1944. The turret bore a striking resemblance to the Type 2 Ho-E's, albeit fortified with 75mm of frontal armor. Notably smaller and lighter than its successor's cast turret, this initial iteration showcased a promising direction. The hull, boasting 75mm of frontal armor, marked a considerable size augmentation, measuring 6.34 meters in length, 2.87 meters in width, and also 2.67 meters in height. Weighing in at approximately 24 tons, the Chito prototype slightly undercut the original planned weight. Powering this armored beast was the 412 horsepower Mitsubishi AL air-cooled diesel engine. Mobility trials unfolded from the 16th of May to the 20th, spanning the 4th Technical Army Research Institute and also the Sagami Proving Grounds. The chassis earned accolades for its overall performance, achieving a commendable on-road top speed of 46 kilometers an hour. The Mitsubishi engine proved its mettle, excelling in cooling, and the hydraulic steering mechanism and synchro mesh transmission garnered high praise for their user-friendly operation. A display test for the general manager on the 25th further validated the positive results. On the 29th of May, the experimental 5.7cm tank gun Marushin took its place in the turret, unleashing 89 rounds in testing. Challenges emerged as firing loosened 5 rivets in the turret, impeding rotation on inclined surfaces. Additionally, the 5.7cm gun fell short of its planned muzzle velocity, reaching only 798 meters per second instead of the targeted 810 meters per second. Even if the gun had hit the intended velocity, its fate as a contender was questionable. Consequently, the 57mm Cheeto met its demise, relegated to the annals of cancelled projects. The fate of the first Cheeto prototype remained shrouded in uncertainty. Production reports from December 44 classify it as unfinished, leaving room for speculation that the 57mm Cheeto might not have been deemed complete during its May 44 trials. If this holds true, it suggests the possibility that the subsequent 75mm Cheeto prototype, finalized in February 45, might have repurposed the hull of the 57mm Cheeto, integrating it with the larger cast turret and also 75mm gun. Alternatively, if the unfinished designation is a production report error, the 57mm Cheeto prototype could have been either preserved or dismantled, while the new 75mm Cheeto prototype was constructed from the ground up. As usual, when it comes to Japanese vehicles, there's always a little bit of uncertainty when it comes to what is true and what isn't. But this vehicle would still be very nice to see. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.
I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shea, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.